Welcome to the Blue Watch, your backstage pass to the lives of frontline officers and the leadership steering the way. I'm Chris Casto. Joining us today is Lieutenant Matt Davis from Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office in Colorado. Besides being in law enforcement for over 13 years, Matt is developing leaders with his company True Bold. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Well, tell me a little bit about your background in law enforcement. Like, what has led you to start True Bold, and kind of what is that about?
Well, my journey to law enforcement is different than most people. It's my second career. I worked in the auto finance industry for about 15 years, and I ended up going to Citizens Police Academy. And after going to the Citizens Police Academy, I'm like, is somebody gonna pay me to go around and solve people's help people problem solve? And so I was very excited about that. It took me about 3 years to actually get through the police academy and get hired. So I've been doing it since 2011. So I've had a really good career. I've moved through work patrol, worked detentions, worked undercover work, and became a sergeant after my time in the undercover work, and was a sergeant for almost 5.5 years. And then now I've been a lieutenant almost 2 years now, and I'm assigned to our detention facility. So I supervise around 50 plus people, and I really enjoy that. In my True Bold came from a college paper. So much like a lot of law enforcement officers, we start without a degree, and we sort of see that it's going to um, help us, propel ourselves in our career. So I went back to school, and I'm proud to say I'm gonna graduate from the University of Denver in August of next year of 2025 with a degree in organizational leadership. I'm moving right into a master's degree because I'm halfway through that program as well in organizational leadership. So I just have my hobby has become leadership, and True Bold just came out of that and came out of my personal struggles. I did have to ask for help and get professional mental health help during my career. And I'm just sort of rolling it all in together. And my own personal thing is True Bold is all about helping others, you know, unearth the true boldness within. And that's what our slogan is and my personal mission statement.
Well, and you said it came out of like a paper that you wrote.
Yes.
What is that from? What happened there?
So I was in leadership class,
Hmm.
and they were like, hey, why don't you talk about what would be your personal, like, what would you want as a leader? And what do you see that there's holes in? And my big thing, Chris, is I was always looking for that mentor to come alongside me and help me with my career. And I am super lucky. I've had multiple great leaders in my law enforcement career come alongside and help me with my career, but I wanted that mentor that was 100, like for me inside and outside of work. And I just chose to become that mentor that I always wanted. So that's what I'm trying to do now with Truebold.
Do you have any mentors that have given you advice that has helped you along this journey?
Oh yeah, I mean, since I have mentors in different buckets, right? As being an entrepreneur, just like yourself having this podcast and being an entrepreneur, you're out there. So I have some entrepreneurial mentors that are out there that are doing it. I've become a voracious reader of leadership books. So I get a lot of insight from that. And I've been able to make friends with some of the authors of those books. And then being part of a professional organization through work that's just leadership driven, I've been able to have multiple mentors that are chiefs of police, sheriffs around the country, people that have a lot more rank than you and I do as lieutenants, to see them out there doing what they need to do. And that's just really, I law enforcement became much bigger than myself when I got involved with FBI LEDA. And I don't know if you've ever done any of those events, but going to their conference was huge for me. I have an article out on my LinkedIn that actually talks about my FBI LEDA journey and how that helped me through the way, to discover that for me to be the true leader that I want to be, I needed to take some steps. And that was mentally, physically, and as well as just educationally to better myself.
And tell me about, you talked about different books and stuff. One of the ones that I enjoy is like Start with Why from Simon Sinek. So,
Yes.
you talk about how your passion now is for pursuing leadership. It's kind of like this hobby, this passion that you have. What makes that your why? Why is it, what drives you into that pursuing leadership development?
My why, Chris, is I want to be, I'm a transformational leader that wants to help build high trust environments.
Mm,
And a lot of people will think, well, you're in law enforcement. How much more, isn't that just a step down from being in the military where there's all this camaraderie, all this high level trust? And our career has changed, over my 13 years, it's really changed on how we interact with one another and what that level of trust is or not trust, or low trust environments. So that's really my passion is I want everybody that works with me on a team to feel like I trust them, just like the state trusts them when they certify them as a post-certified peace officer, and the city hires them or the county hires them and gives them a gun and a badge. They send them out in a car to do their job. Well, that should be good enough for me to trust them that they're going to do what they need to do.
mm,
And for me as a leader, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. So, and it's an interesting story how I found Simon Sinek. I went to a tactical class where they're talking about responding to about leading in a situation where there's an active shooter, that kind of thing. And
mm,
it was being taught by Green Berets, some ex Green Beret or former Green Berets and Rangers, and people were like, "Hey, what about all these new people, these millennials, these Gen Zs that say they always want to know their why? Like they're always stopping. What do you do in the military now about this why?" And they're like, "We just add on to the briefing. We explain the why we're doing that because we don't want to have that discussion when it's boots on the ground, when it's time
mm,
to assault a location." So I went home and I started thinking about, this question of why seems super easy. I started Googling it, and the first book that came up was Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And then I read the book and I'm like, wow, this makes from a cognitive standpoint, he does a great job of showing what your brain is actually, limbic brain is doing
mm.
and why is so important. So that's where a lot of my training comes out of. I talk about a lot about start with why. That's the first third of my training part of it. And then we move right into creating boundaries, creating that control circle for everybody. And then we get to that third and final part. And that's when we figure out how are you going to communicate your leadership style to the people that you want to lead.
And that's just crucial. I want to say a couple of things on this. One, you touched on uh, these questions of why, and I love the fact that you bring up that you're a reader. One of the things that I've read, and I find it in every single leadership book. I don't care if it's coming from Simon Sinek and it's actually in his title, or even Jocko Willink even calls it like the commander's intent, and talks about how you have to express your why so that it's so simple that it comes everybody can understand it, and you have to have that true belief in the mission, and telling them your why is what it does. I think that's super important. The other part that you just touched on is knowing how to express what your leadership style is and what you're going to do as a leader. And that was one of the things when I first promoted to sergeant, and I kept it as when I promoted to lieutenant, was okay, what is day one? I'm going to come in there and I'm going to tell them that they're going to know exactly what to expect from me, and they're going to know exactly how I'm going to respond in situations. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important.
That's a really big key that I don't think a lot of organizations teach new leaders. You're learning all these things like policy, procedure, all these, and you're worried about, you think you've observed people doing a leadership role for such a long time, like us in law enforcement. How many times when we were boots on the ground people, we were like, I could be a better sergeant than that person, or I could be a better lieutenant when I'm a sergeant. It's very different every time you get up that ladder of leadership, and it's just it, there needs to be tools, and like that's you see behind me, I've got Believe. I'm a big Ted Lasso fan, and that's where a lot of stuff started, but I use that as my communication tool. And I know that you've saw the Boldness Within that I put out for that for my workbook, and that sort of goes through that Believe framework. But I think that's just every leader can come up with whatever framework they want. Like
Hmm.
like if you want to be the most feared leader, you could use fear. You want to be the most loved leader, you could use the word love, and just come up with what do you want to communicate to your team? What can they expect of you as a leader? Not having that general discussion where we go into the first briefing of the year and say, this is what you're going to do. Like these are my rules. That's not the way people want to be talked to any longer.
No, that's dictatorship. I had a sergeant one time who went in and he literally laid out a list of rules, like super thick, small print on a page. The whole page was covered up front and back. And it's like, dude, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Nobody wants to live by a bunch of strict guidelines and rules. You have to have some level of trust in your people to give them the ability to make choices.
Yeah, and that goes down to I talk about this a lot in with my teammates is, you know, micromanagement is disrespectful. That's
Yeah.
just as simple as we need to get it. Like that's all we need to talk about with micromanagement. It's disrespectful. It's a low trust. That's happening because there's low trust between me and you. And leadership basically is just interpersonal relationships. So
Yep.
as a leader, and I don't know how many people you lead in your command, but I try to meet with everybody, at least talk with them on a weekly basis, at least see them, talk to them, have some type of little conversation with people.
Yeah, it's that relational experience, and that's the relationship that a anybody in a leadership position needs to have with their people. It's the only way you build that trust. I mean, consider it. You were talking about earlier about how, we hire these people, and we give them a gun, and we go through this academy. We also have to have a level of trust. If we can trust these people to make life and death decisions out on calls, why can't I trust you to know when to go to lunch? I mean,
Yes,
you have to know this asinine level that we get to, and it's like, come on, we don't need that.
right. Yes, I mean we expect them to go handle calls for service and go to calls, and we get upset if they call us. Like I knew when I was a patrol sergeant, I would be like, "Why is this person continuing to call me?" Just I don't need to know everything that you've done out on. I don't need to take a the old timey daffer, hand drawn daffer. I don't need to do that any longer. Like go out and do your job, and I'm here to support you. So let me know how I can support you and advocate for you.
Yeah, but I turn it around on them. If I get calls like that, I turn around and be like, well, what do you want to do? Cool,
Hmm.
sounds like a good idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, my verbiage is always that sounds appropriate. You know, it's that's they're just looking for validation and they want to be
Mhm.
seen and heard in the moment and it shouldn't be a difficult conversation or a frustrating conversation. It should just be an encouragement. Hey, it
Yeah,
sounds like you know what you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. It needs to be where you're not sitting there chastising them for calling you. Like, why are you calling me? It's more of a, oh, cool. Sounds like a fun day. Let me know how it goes.
Yes. Yeah. Where are we going to lunch? Is the next most important question.
I want to touch on something you said earlier. You said you kind of had a little bit of personal struggle that, throughout your career. And I mean, honestly, we all do. Every one of us goes through mental health struggle. I was honestly in a meeting earlier today when we were talking about mental health struggles with officers. And previously, I was listening to an interview that you did where you were talking about how in the way you phrased it was so poignant to me. It was discovering a toxic relationship with yourself. And I thought that was interesting because we talk about toxic leadership and what that means, but we don't really talk about that toxic relationship with yourself and how that could actually hurt you in a leadership position.
Yeah, I did have I've been on record a bunch of times on a bunch of podcasts talking about my toxic relationship with myself. And it was just a lot of negative self-talk. I could have arrested the top person on the FBI's most wanted list, and I would still think that I was not a very good police officer. I like just name a list of things, and I was my own worst enemy. And I was living I don't know if I was just living a life of being very downtrodden and not encouraging myself. I was a people pleaser. So from the outward standpoint, it looked very much like if you would have called me and say, "Hey Matt, let's go out," we'd have this type of same conversation, but I didn't feel like I could be my authentic self. And I had a lot of ups and downs with that. As you know, in the career, we see people on their very worst day.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
the only time we see them.
right.
You don't call 911 because you're happy.
Correct. Correct. And it just piles up. Your bucket gets full and it overflows, and it doesn't just like where it overflowed for me was in my personal life, in my family life. I'm divorced, and that I think a lot of that had to do with the job, but a lot of it, more of it had to do with me having such a toxic relationship and not feeling like I was seen and heard as a human being, not just in that relationship, just in general. I was not comfortable with Matt Davis. I was not comfortable with having a conversation with somebody about what I really cared about or what I really thought. Because I'd go in the other room and say, you're a real, I just had a lot of negative self-talk and I needed help with that. And it got to the point where I had to call a friend. I was not suicidal, but I needed help. And then that led to hard conversations the next day to come into work and have to talk to my at that time I was a sergeant, my fellow sergeants, my lieutenant, and my captain. And saying that stuff out loud to them, and then them looking at me and say, we don't perceive you that way, Matt. It was really shocking. It was part of the process. So I think there are more people like that out there, Chris, that
Hmm.
are having that negative self-talk, and they're not. I'm just out here trying to say that's not unusual, and you can come out of it and you can work on it and you can stop that toxic relationship, because we always want to blame other people for being toxic or leaders being toxic, but we're never ever helping each other and talking about it and encouraging each other to be better.
It's okay to not be okay. And part of the, and there's kind of, I see two different issues along with this. One is we don't do, as people promote up, we don't do a good job in teaching them how to be leaders and to letting them know it's okay if you screw up. We all do it. And it's all right that, you make these choices and you screw up. It's okay to stumble when you promote. It's part of that growth, painful growth process. You're working out, you're basically ripping muscle over and over again in order to build better muscle. So you're literally going to hurt yourself and mess up, growing as a leader. And the second part of that is that, we need to be okay enough to own when we're not doing okay. We
Mhm.
suffer mental health trauma way higher than the normal population just based on the calls we go to, but we're less likely to speak up because we feel as first responders it's a detriment to our career to talk about it. But we need to combat that. As leaders, we need to take that stand and move forward with that.
Yeah, and one of the stories I always share just to show, what your sort of mental, type of calls you go from time to time. When I was an investigator in our special investigations unit, I was also a negotiator at the same time. On one day, I went from investigating OIS in the morning where an officer was killed to going home for a little while to negotiating a veteran off a roof the night, and then I get woken up and I'm working another homicide where a husband had killed a wife. And that's all within. I woke up at 6 a.m. in the morning to go in the OIS to I think I came home at night the next day, after the search warrant and everything, probably about midnight. So about a 36-hour period. And people don't realize, and new people to the career, they think it will be awesome to work all these complex cases, but it takes a lot out of you, especially when you're working those very complex cases um, where there's a lot of moving parts and your brain doesn't shut off because you're always thinking about that investigation.
And those different roles, like you said, being a hostage negotiator. I was an HN as well in my agency, and some of the most stressful parts of my career were talking people off of high elevated buildings or
Hmm.
overpasses. And I've been on the phone with a guy who ended up shooting himself while I was talking to him on the phone. It's like things happen in our career that hit us, and it does take a toll over time. So we need to be okay to just say, yeah, I need time off, or I need a break, or I need more encouragement at this point because I need help. We as leaders, people who promote up, we don't promote up because it's easy. We need to take that stance and help others in our career.
And that's the other thing about talking positively to ourselves, Chris. Where we've gotten to in our careers is hard work. Like I look at myself and I think for 13 years, I've been a fast riser. And I don't give myself enough credit for that. And a lot of people are like, hey, when are you going to get when are you going to get an award? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? Well, when are you going to start advocating for yourself?
Yeah.
Because no one's going to come along and say, we're going to make you, you need to assess. I'm sure in Austin, there are a bunch of assessment steps that you have to take, testing, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
just not going to hand you lieutenant's bars.
Right. You have to promote up, you have to show merit. We just got under contract here in Austin, and there's not only the promotion, there's an assessment, and at this point, there's also you have to go sit before a board and talk about, different aspects of your career, like a resume. So there's different things that you have to do to show your merit before you get moved up.
Yeah. I that when you were sharing about you being on the negotiations team, my my big ones that would always stress me out is when I was the lead negotiator and I'd been talking through a throw phone for hours, and then we finally make entry because it's days before drones. Like drones have changed it tremendously because you can fly those things in anywhere, but then you find out the suspect has killed themselves like probably within 10 minutes of being into the altercation, and you've just been talking to them and you're trying to build rapport that entire, you're learning all about this person and trying to get them to engage with you on a throw phone, and then you go in there and you find someone deceased. Those are the ones that stick with me, not the one, I had never had somebody actually kill themselves on the phone like a lot of negotiators have, but the simple ones that people think that was no big deal were ended up being a big deal for me.
Oh yeah, and in some of them, like you feel like a failure. Like I could sit here and kick myself in the butt all day long. Okay, I was on the phone with him and he died. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
No, I don't. I refuse to do that because the fact is that he would have done it himself anyway. And what I did on that day was that he was wanting to actually get his wife on the phone, and I said no,
Mm-mm.
we're absolutely not doing that. And then he pulled the trigger. Had I said yes, he would have had her on the phone and traumatized her as well.
Yeah.
And so I have to take back and say I could kick myself in the butt all day that yeah he died, but in the end I say okay, well there is a win. I stopped her from having that trauma.
Yes. You did your job that day.
Yeah, and you have to sit there and believe in yourself. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about some of the posts that I see that you do on LinkedIn. I know you're a big Ted Lasso fan. You got the whole believe thing back there. I love it. And I think that that's part of it. You do need to believe in yourself. And that even is built in as a framework for some of the true bold stuff that you teach as far as leadership principles. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Well, a little bit, being a negotiator, active listening is a huge thing. So
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of active listening, just not just in your career, but in your life. If you take a more active listening stance with your kids, your significant others, your family members, that really helps. So that's one of the big things. But the believe framework is believe and have confidence in yourself is that first B, right? Just be able to do that and understand that you have confidence in yourself. The empathy, that's the first E of believe. And that really comes down to, are you able to be empathetic, but also vulnerable? Can you be vulnerable? Like Brene Brown, her whole thing is about vulnerability. And really, Simon Sinek, if you watch a lot of his stuff on his TED Talks and stuff like that, he talks about that situation where you need to be vulnerable. And you can find him all the time being in a very vulnerable moment on any of his stuff. And that L is listening, active listening, like really listening and thinking about it, not just from what's going in your ears, but how are you like, are you sitting the right way? Is your body language? Uh, a lot of people converse the way that we are now, and you're only getting about 25% of my body language. Um, and then the I is innovation. What are you doing creatively? Like we talk about trauma all the time in our jobs. Well, there's a lot of authors out there that will talk about how, and studies done, that trauma creates a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation. And I don't think we lean into that enough in policing right now because we're doing it like we've always done it. And
Yeah.
then the next E is empowerment. Like, do you have the courage as a leader to empower the people that are on your team? Like we were talking about before, are you going to trust them? Like, are you going to build trust? Are you going to do this? And are you going to have the courage to be disliked as well? That's a book I just got done with this year, The Courage to Be Disliked. I really would suggest any leader read that because that's an awesome conversation to read about. The V, vision, if you have vision, are you acting on your vision or you just keep talking about the vision? Do you trust yourself to be able to do that and taking the risks to step out there and do that? The next thing is the last E is excellence and resilience. Are you trying to strive for excellence? And what does that look like? Like if you want to be on a SWAT team, are you working out enough? Are you running enough? If you want to be anything, like if you want to be I'm trying to think of some things, a lot of times for student, I'm big in education. If you want to be better and you want to be seen differently, because I felt very um, I used to say marginalized, but I would say just very put aside because I did not have my college degree.
Mm.
And I felt like I was being, because there are a lot of people in law enforcement that have their master's degree, especially when you get up there to having stars and bars on your collar. There's a lot of people that, and I thought education, it's like, I'd rather be educated by the streets, and do all this kind of stuff. You hear that a lot, but to actually come up with, take the time to educate yourself and learn new things. I'm learning so much more new stuff that's just happened and looking at new research that's happened since the Great Resignation and the COVID lockdown.
Hmm.
There's huge amounts of information and research coming out, and it's changed our world forever. And I don't think policing has caught up to that, especially we just continue to try to do it the way we've always done it. So that's a little bit about the belief framework. And I know you've got a copy of the workbook, and hopefully people will reach out, and it's completely free. I'd love for people to download that and use it in their day-to-day leadership.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about how you felt that the skills that you had were kind of pushed aside because you didn't have that college degree. I kind of had a little bit of the opposite almost. It was like I felt like yeah, I had a college degree, but it's on radio, TV, communications. It was kind of useless to be honest with you. But when I went into policing, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, what skills do I have from that? What can I draw from it? And it's communication, it's speaking. That's why I became a negotiator because it was that communication
Mhm.
aspect. And I'm sure coming from it was your background, you use some of that same reasoning of having that communication helped you, especially in negotiating standpoint.
My first job when I got out of college was when I stopped going to college the first time in the 90s is I repossessed cars. I went and worked and I did repossession of cars. So and then I ended up my first leadership role in one of those companies was leading a group of collectors. And what I ended up doing is I did something really simple, and the bank I work for just thought it was the greatest thing ever. I bought little mirrors for everybody for their monitors, and I said, let's see what would happen if you just smile and ask for them to pay their car payment. Our numbers jumped way up and our delinquency went way down because people felt the smile coming through the phone. And it wasn't this adversarial relationship of, hey, I need you to pay your car payment right now.
Yeah, because interestingly enough, and I learned this when I was going through some of the classes for negotiation school, is that even on a phone, you can hear a smile. Like
Yes.
your voice changes, even when you're just talking. It's smiling. It actually changes how your voice sounds. So it does a lot.
And ultimately, Chris, what I would like to do, and I think a lot of people will scoff or roll their eyes at me that have been in law enforcement leadership for a long time. I want people to come to work and be excited about coming to work and love their work.
Mm.
They don't need to, we don't need to have a family environment or anything like that, but just love coming to work and be excited about what they might have happen today. Not bad things, but just they're going to go out there and be prepared and be encouraged. And hopefully they're doing that to the stakeholders of the communities that they serve.
Oh yeah, and finding that enjoyment and that love that you have, and finding different things that you enjoy out of it. I had a guy one time that he and his hobby in his spare time he likes skateboarding. So we had a local skate park in our area. I was like, dude, grab your skateboard, go skateboard out there. He's like, really, in uniform? Yeah, just wear a
Yeah,
helmet so workers' comp doesn't get on me, but do it.
right.
And he ended up having a great time and got a lot of commendations, and even news media started being like, "Hey, what's this cop doing out here?" It's like, well, he's patrolling his area.
Yeah. Correct.
It's
He's
like,
patrolling his area but he's building relationships with the community. If people took a survey in that area, they probably felt better about your police department than other areas because they saw somebody out of their car.
yeah. And that's exactly right. Get your butt out of the seat. I'm sorry. If you're just sitting in your car waiting for the next call, you're doing it wrong. You get out of the seat.
Yeah. Well, staffing is a big thing right now and staffing and retention. And that's the other thing. Like I really think that leadership and I think that more Gen Zs are looking for leadership as soon as they get there. And it's not hand-holding leadership, but looking for people that are actually leaders because they want to feel bigger than they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, just like
Hmm.
Simon Sinek says. And I talk about that a lot with all my teammates and the different leaders I talk to around the country. You need to instill that thing. We're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Hmm.
And your picture behind you is a great example of that. Great history of the Austin Police Department is right there. And
Yeah.
all those people were, we'd be like, wow, that'd be crazy doing law enforcement on horseback. But you're part of that organization and that legacy.
Yeah. And I love it. And it's interesting. It's like, finding something that's just bigger than yourselves. I remember talking, or I'm sorry, I was listening to this interview, and this guy, I think he was an economist, and he was talking about different generations and what they seek in their jobs. Our grandparents' generation, they were literally looking for food. They needed to work in order to live. So they worked in order to live. They took whatever job was available and worked in order to live. Our parents' generation, they had food, right? So now they're working in order to find promotions, in order to do better than the previous generation. And so they get promoted and they had better housing and all that.
Mhm.
So now this generation, okay, my generation, it's like, okay, we grew up with food, we didn't need that. We grew up with better housing and promotional prospects, we didn't need that. So what do we need? Now we're looking for purpose. So
Yes,
the interesting thing is that the generation we have now is looking for purpose in their life, and that's what they want in their jobs, and that's what they're craving. So we need to give them that.
right. And there's no more bigger purpose than policing. Like I think it's been a great career and you get to interact and get to help people on a daily basis. It's
Yeah.
a great purpose. I don't know what you could, I love it. I mean,
No.
unless you want to be a fire person, which we won't get into that about the fire
What?
department.
You could be a firefighter, but you'd be sitting there playing video games all day, and it's like,
Right.
it gets old.
Correct. Washing trucks and stuff like that. So,
No, I joke a lot about it, but I mean honestly, I love our firefighter partners. They do such an amazing job, and they get called to every crazy thing because our firefighters in Austin go everywhere with like the when the ambulance has to be called, they end up going,
mhm.
and it's like they work hand in hand, and we see them out on calls all the time. So I love working with them.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I'll give them shit all day, but I
Right.
love working with them.
Because they get to work out at work. Like that's the big thing that we're pissed off about, right? They get paid to work out.
No, what we're jealous about is the fact that, we do all this work and, everybody hates us, but they do all whatever they do and everybody loves them. So it's like, whatever.
Correct. I did have on one call for service when I worked patrol. There was a family that was having had somebody had a heart attack, not a heart attack, but some kind of medical issue. And I called the ambulance, and one of the people there at the house was like, "Wait, I need to go get dressed." So then they disappeared for a little bit, and then came back, and they looked like a supermodel when the fire department got there.
Oh, of course. They had to get ready. They had prepared
They had to get
themselves
ready
for
for the
the
firemen.
moment.
Yeah, they had to get
Yeah.
ready.
Oh man. Well, and you were talking a little bit about it earlier about your belief framework. Now, you have a few downloadable guides that are for free on your website. Tell me about how those work and kind of what the overall objectives of those are.
Really, they're just out there to be thought starters for people and help them. I'm really passionate about right now about helping people. It's 2025. We're almost in 2025. We're in the last quarter. Get them pre-thinking about what's going to go on their team because in law enforcement, a lot of times we're getting a total turnover of teams because of the way we bid for shifts and things like that. So just be out there and be tools because I understand not everybody's going to have time to read the books that I've read or go to the classes that I've gone to. So I'm just trying to pass on a little bit of information on that and just have it be a tool. Have them both be tools. The smart guide is also, something that is very easy and measurable to be able to do that. And in my content, also on LinkedIn, I've got a bunch of content. I share that a bunch. I'm just about to put some posts out about the questions I'm going to ask to my leaders and of my team for next year. And they're very simple questions. Like it starts with, what's your current why? Because why changes every year.
Yeah.
Um, how do you define trust? I ask everybody, how do you define trust? What are your 2025 goals? What are you looking to do? What's your definition of help? Like what do you define? Because I always ask, how can I help you get to your goals? But now I'm adding that thing in of, hey, what is your definition of help? Because Matt's definition of help might be completely different than Chris's definition of help. And
Yeah.
then you know, what is your definition of done? Which I don't know if, the Scrum, I've learned a lot about Scrum in college, and that's not used a ton in policing, but that definition of done is different from other people. It's going to be different just like trust is from person to person
Mm.
because we need to get, I just recently talked to my team about the pizza box and how I'm not going to be a pizza box leader. We're not
Hmm.
gonna, I don't want them going from pizza celebration to pizza celebration. I want us to reach our goals, high five, do all those things, and then decide as a team how we're gonna celebrate that instead of just, hey, I bought 10 pizzas, here's pizzas. Like, yay, we reached our goal. I don't want them to get conditioned to that pizza box leadership. And I want leaders to understand we've got to change our model in law enforcement from transactional leadership to transformational leadership. Because that's gonna make departments be that much more innovative, creative, and we're able to talk to our stakeholders. With the election just being the other day, there were a lot of departments out there asking for money, asking for additional FTEs. We're always afraid to communicate. I think that if we had a clear message, it's going to be a lot easier to communicate to the people and to the politicians and our stakeholders and our community members more than just, hey, we're transactional. You call us, we show up, you grade us.
Hmm.
We can transform the community to be the community that we want if we're just willing to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And what type of response have you received about some of the work with Truebold, from the people commenting on posts or the response you've had from your website?
Yeah, I started with just on LinkedIn,
Mm.
and I have a bunch of followers on there, but I've had from time to time I have book clubs, and that's where I get a lot of responses from. My last book club, we went through the first two seasons of Ted Lasso, which was awesome, and I got
So,
great feedback. And
so not really a book club, more like a show club, or
yeah, well, we there is a book. I'm reading a book about Ted Lasso philosophy, so I
Mhm.
think it's going to be a little bit more structured next time when we do that, when we get into the third season. But I've gotten a bunch of leaders from other walks of life, other careers, a lot of municipality, people that work in county clerks, city managers, assistant city managers, those kind of things. Also engage with Truebold. I've been excited. I went out to Rangeley, Colorado, and was able to meet with their leadership group and do the 4-hour training with them. That went great. Had a lot of positive feedback from that. I've recently got to talk to our detentions training officers at work as Truebold. So I took the day off and then came in and did my presentation, and I got a lot of positive feedback because when you go to your own department, like I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was waiting for somebody to jump up and say, he's full of shit, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of good feedback from that, and people have given a lot of good feedback. I'm actually super excited. In December, I'm going to get to go to my first conference as um, as a conference speaker. I'm going to be part of a group, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read it off here because it's so off the beaten path of law enforcement, but it's the Rise Women in Healthcare Leadership Summit. I'm going to be part
Hmm.
of that in December in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I'm going to be talking about having strategies for negotiating difficult conversations. We're going to have a board of people here talking about that. So I'm very excited about that, just getting the message out. So um, True Bold, I do offer services where I do one-on-one mentoring if people would like to do that. I have that in place if people want to get to know me a little bit more. But my superpower is networking, Chris, and I love to meet people, and I want to be able to have a one-on-one conversation with people and see how I can advocate for you. If it's in a mentoring role, I would love to do that. If it's an encouragement role, I'd love to do that as well. So True Bold has been very, when I look back now, it's sort of like my career. It's a fast mover right now, and I'm excited to see where it's going to be in 2025, this time in 2025. I expect it to be even more exciting and have more things going on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love the idea of like the book club and that it's not just for books. Y'all went through that whole with the Ted Lasso season 1 and 2. My wife and I, we really enjoyed that show. And we always, joke with each other. It's like, yeah, don't worry about all that other BS. It's just poopy. So,
It's just poopy. Yeah.
yeah. So
You
if
just
you
let it
watch
go
the show,
through.
you know it.
Yeah. It's just all poopy.
It's all poopy. Just let it float away.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's season three. We haven't gotten to that one yet, but there's a lot of things, and that's the thing about Ted Lasso is I as soon as I put a believe sign in my sorry, wrong shoulder here. As soon as I put that in my window at work, I don't know how many people would just put their hand on the believe sign. Like you as an entrepreneur, you're always working to try to figure out how are you going to connect with people.
Mm.
And believe just is the way that I've connected to people. And I do have people all the time, Chris. I have people that come up to me and say, "Hey, when are they going to finally get you for trademark infringement?" And I'm like, "Okay, you know, clearly you're just not buying into my messaging, right?" Because there's no trademark around that. The word is believe, and I want people to believe in themselves and believe that they are bold enough to live the dreams that they want to have, the life they want to have. It's out there.
Yeah. And I would almost turn it around and be like, I look forward to the day when they do that because that means that I've gotten so successful with this
Yes.
that my message has gotten out there to the level where Apple, TV is going to come and haunt me later.
Correct.
It's like, good
Correct.
luck.
Right. Good luck. But I get a lot of feedback from my friends and they just and people I've worked with for a long time. They're like, I see a difference in you, Matt. You're different than you were, 3 years ago. And we love your passion. Like a lot of times they'll be like, we don't really like, I'm not really on board with what you're talking about, but I love your passion. Because I do talk about inclusion and DEI and things like that that are really third rail conversations for law enforcement people. And I'm getting my master's degree in that area. So I love having that conversation.
Well, let me ask you this and just kind of help wrap everything up in a nice little bun. In teaching leadership, what is one lesson that you want people to learn? That one takeaway that you would give the world with no cost?
I would say have the courage to be authentic. Have the courage to be authentic and know that there are other people out there that are willing to support you. If you don't, like that would be my freebie. If anybody ever hit me up on social media or called me on my phone and said, I want to be authentic, can you support me in that? I would be all about it.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Blue Watch. Please share and subscribe for more leadership insights from the front line and check out our website, thebluewatch.com. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.